Hello everyone. From today onwards, I am going to start a series of lectures on the subject pharmacology, where we will understand the subject very conceptually, and where needed, we will of course learn the concepts in a very fun manner. So let's start. Our first topic is autonomic nervous system. The first thing I want to tell you about the autonomic nervous system that it is primarily a motor system. It is primarily a motor system, but don't think that there is no sensory input to it. Of course, there is a sensory input which is accompanied with the autonomic nervous system, but it is primarily a motor system. Okay, as autonomic nervous system is primarily a motor system, now you have to understand that how the motor system in our body works. So in our body, the motor system can be broadly classified into two types. One is ANS, one is SNS. ANS stands for autonomic nervous system. SNS stands for somatic nervous system. As the name suggests, it is autonomic nervous system. That means it will work on those muscles which are autonomic in nature. In other terms, they are involuntary in nature. And what are those muscles? They are cardiac muscle and smooth muscles. And another thing, autonomic nervous system also supplies to all the glands of the body. Now come to the somatic nervous system. As the name suggests, it supplies the somatic muscles. In fact, the whole group of somatic muscles are voluntary muscles. And voluntary muscle constitutes of skeletal muscles and somatic muscles. Okay. Now, before going detail into the autonomic nervous system, I want you to learn some basic concepts of somatic nervous system which will be utilized later. Okay. So what I've written here is the basic unit. The basic unit of somatic nervous system is a neuromuscular junction. What I have written is NMJ. NMJ is neuromuscular. I'm writing down. It is neuromuscular junction. Okay, is the basic unit. So as the name suggests, there must be a neuron and there must be a muscle. So here I have drawn a neuron and here I have drawn a muscle. So this is basically the neuromuscular junction. But how this neuron interact with this muscle to produce action? There must be some intermediate, and that intermediate compound is a neurotransmitter. And what is the neurotransmitter in every neuromuscular junction? It is acetylcholine. The acetylcholine is released from the neuron. And how it acts on this muscle? On the muscle there is a receptor for acetylcholine. The name of the receptor, which is present in, very carefully listen to my words. The name of the receptor which is present on the muscle part of the neuromuscular junction is NM. What is the full form of NM? That is nicotinic receptor muscle type. NM. N for nicotinic. I wrongly written there. Nicotinic muscle type. Okay. So from here we understand that the somatic nervous system has a basic unit which is called as a neuromuscular junction. Neuromuscular junction constitutes of a nerve and a muscle. The nerve releases the neurotransmitter which is acetylcholine. The muscle receives the signal by the means of a receptor, which the receptor name is nicotinic M receptor, like NM receptor. Then What is the output of this signaling? Due to the action of acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, the muscle contracts. Okay. So now if you have to relax the muscle, if you have to relax this muscle, what you have to do? We have to block this receptor. We have to block this receptor. So if I block this receptor, then the muscle will be relaxed. Hence, those drugs or those medicines which block these receptors are called as skeletal muscle relaxants. These are called as skeletal muscle relaxants. And a very interesting thing, those drugs which act as a skeletal muscle relaxant, their name ends with curium or curonium. Okay, very important. I am writing again. Those drugs which act as skeletal muscle relaxant, their name ends with curium or curonium. Okay, rocuronium, vicuronium, atracurium. You must have listened to these drugs. So they act as skeletal muscle relaxants, and the mechanism action of them, they block the NM receptor in the neuromuscular junction. Okay, now come to our main topic, that is autonomic nervous system. As I told earlier, autonomic nervous system will supply the involuntary muscle, that is the cardiac muscle and the smooth muscle and the glands. Now autonomic nervous system is further divided into two subtypes based on their nature. These two subtypes are named as, one is sympathetic nervous system, another one is parasympathetic nervous system. As the name suggests, parasympathetic nervous system is completely paradoxical to sympathetic nervous system. Paradoxical means the parasympathetic nervous system is completely opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. The actions performed by sympathetic nervous system are completely opposite of the parasympathetic nervous system. And one important thing, that when one system is on, other system is off, and vice versa. That means when sympathetic system is working, parasympathetic system is off, and when parasympathetic system is working, sympathetic system won't work. Okay, now come to the basic difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic system. The basic difference lies between their origin. The sympathetic nervous system is also called as thoracolumbar outflow. That means the sympathetic nervous system originates from the thoracic and the lumbar spinal segments. If I want to specify, this is from T1 to L2. Suppose this is a spinal cord. We know cranial nerves originate from the brain. Then cervical, thoracic, lumbar and sacral. Okay, these are cranial nerves, cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral. So the sympathetic nervous system is thoracolumbar outflow, and here I have written the parasympathetic nervous system is a craniosacral outflow. Okay, cranio matlab it originates from the cranial nerves. Which cranial nerves comes under parasympathetic nervous system? There are 3, 7, 9 and 10. And which sacral divisions? These are S2, S3 and S4. So it must be very clear about the origin or outflow of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. As I told you, the sympathetic nervous system is thoracolumbar outflow. The parasympathetic nervous system is craniosacral outflow. A very easy way to remember this, as in MBBS there are some core clinical subjects and some subjects are paraclinical subjects, which helps building concepts of this core clinical subject. Similarly, the parasympathetic system is around the core sympathetic system. This is the parasympathetic, above and below, craniosacral. Okay, I hope this thing will help you to remember the outflow of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. As I discussed, there is neuromuscular junction in the somatic nervous system, and there is release of a neurotransmitter. Similarly, in autonomic nervous system also there is release of some neurotransmitters. The main neurotransmitter in the sympathetic nervous system is noradrenaline or norepinephrine. The same. These are the same. And the main neurotransmitter in the parasympathetic nervous system is acetylcholine. So as the main neurotransmitter here is noradrenaline, the sympathetic nervous system is also called as adrenergic nervous system. As the main neurotransmitter acetylcholine in parasympathetic, hence the parasympathetic nervous system is also called as cholinergic nervous system. I hope this is very clear. The main neurotransmitter release here is noradrenaline. That's why the system is called as adrenergic nervous system. The main neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. That's why the name of the system is cholinergic nervous system. And as here we discussed, the acetylcholine will interact with a receptor to produce its action, that is a nicotinic M in case of somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system also has some receptors to act upon by the neurotransmitter. The receptors present in the sympathetic nervous system are alpha and beta, whereas the parasympathetic receptors are muscarinic receptor. Okay, now all these here what I told you are about the end neuron acting upon a organ. Okay, but actually there are two neurons exist in the autonomic nervous system. Suppose this is a brain and the spinal cord. Suppose you're talking about the sympathetic nervous system and is a thoracic outflow. One nerve comes out from the spinal cord, which is called as a presynaptic neuron, and from this another neuron originates, which is called as a postsynaptic neuron, and this neuron acts on the involuntary muscles. Now this is a nerve junction formed here. This is called as ganglion. Okay, I hope everybody remember this. The neurotransmitter and receptor I talked about here are in respect of this thing, the postsynaptic neuron and the end organ. Here in case of sympathetic nervous system, noradrenaline is released and that acts upon alpha and beta receptor. Suppose this is sacral outflow and this is parasympathetic nervous system. This will release acetylcholine and acetylcholine will work on muscarinic receptor. But how the transmission occurs here? Remember, Here the neurotransmitter always is acetylcholine, and the receptor it will work upon is N receptor. Here we have learnt about the NM receptor. Here I am talking about N receptor, whose full form goes like nicotinic neuronal. There is nicotinic muscle type. This is nicotinic neuron type. Okay, I have drawn a ganglion here. The ganglion is nothing but the nerve junction. The neurotransmitter here, irrespective of parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system, is acetylcholine, and the receptor here, irrespective of sympathetic and parasympathetic, is nicotinic N type. I hope you have remembered this thing, and with this we have completed the introduction to autonomic nervous system. Let's recap it. Autonomic nervous system is primarily a motor system. Before talking about motor system, I told you a broad classification of motor system. It is divided into two types: those which control the involuntary muscle and glands, called as autonomic nervous system, and those who control the voluntary muscles, called as somatic nervous system. The basic unit of a somatic nervous system is neuromuscular junction, which constitutes of a nerve and a muscle. Nerve releases a neurotransmitter, which is acetylcholine, which acts upon the NM receptor present on the muscle, and the output is muscle contraction. So if we have to relax the muscle, we have to block this receptor, and this work is done by some drugs called as skeletal muscle relaxants, whose names end with curium and curonium. For example, vicuronium, rocuronium, itracurium. Now come to autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is of two types. One is sympathetic nervous system, one is parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system are paradoxical to each other. The sympathetic nervous system is activated in stressful situation. The parasympathetic nervous system is activated in relaxed situation. When one system is on, other is off. Then I told about the outflow of the sympathetic nervous system. It originates from the thoracolumbar segment. Parasympathetic nervous system is craniosacral outflow. The neurotransmitter, major neurotransmitter in sympathetic nervous system is noradrenaline. Hence the system is called as adrenergic nervous system. The major neurotransmitter in parasympathetic nervous system is acetylcholine. Hence the system is known as cholinergic nervous system. The receptors of sympathetic nervous system are alpha and beta. The receptors of parasympathetic nervous system is muscarinic receptor. As I told you that the autonomic nervous system has two types of neurons. One is presynaptic neuron, one is postsynaptic neuron. Hence there must be a nerve junction. That nerve junction is called as a ganglion. Now the presynaptic neuron will release a neurotransmitter, which is acetylcholine, irrespective of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and the acetylcholine will work upon the N type of receptor present on the postsynaptic neuron, and the transmission will happen. So that's all about the introduction to autonomic nervous system. Next we'll start with topic physiology of cholinergic system. Okay, we'll then enter to the parasympathetic nervous system, then we'll talk about sympathetic. That's all. Thank you.